So let me disagree a little bit with Chairman Graham when he said he's very pleased with the production out of the FBI. I am not. Let me just give you one example. Here's a document we got from the General Services Administration. You can see that it's an email, and everything's presented except for the very bottom. They've redacted the mobile phone number of the person writing email. Here's the exact same email we got from the FBI. You see something different here? Everything is redacted. And that, we're supposed to get thousands of pages from our, I can finally subpoena the FBI. They are on their second extension. Everything is due by, I think, the 30th of September, and that's the kind of information we get. It's non-information. We have to fight over redacting the same documents that we get from other agencies. So I am not happy at all with the document production we've gotten out of Director Wray and the FBI, not even close.
You know what? I'm really glad you put up those documents, because this is something that I have heard from day one for 3+ years. When Ratcliffe was in Congress, Nunes in Congress, yourself in the Senate, you've been demanding documents to ensure that you understood what took place, and they will not get you the documents.
These people are sick.
They sit on documents and make it incredibly hard for you to prove the point that you know is true, and that is that it was a sham investigation into President Trump, and there's a ton of wrongdoing here. Do you think you're going to get the documents? I mean, is this Christopher Wray? Why is Christopher Wray still in charge of the FBI when he is overseeing these agents sitting on things?
His job should be to restore the credibility and integrity of the FBI, and the only way you do that is through exposure. But the other point I have to make, Maria, when we finally do get these classified sections redacted or unredacted when they become declassified, you look at what information you have and you have to ask yourself the question, what national security interest was at stake here? Why was this ever redacted? The answer is almost always because it embarrassed the agency or it embarrassed a powerful person. That is not the reason to classify information. It's certainly not the reason to keep the truth from the American public. And that's all I've been trying to do, is I've been trying to reveal the truth. Another important point to make. I've been accused of peddling Russian disinformation. There is no Russian disinformation in our 87-page report. The press report on it, and I'm calling on the press. You were duped. You were leaked false information. You should not protect those sources that leaked you false information. It should be your journalistic duty to basically tell the American people who provided you false information that resulted in this 2 or 3 year national nightmare because of the false narratives that you carried the Democrats' water on.
Do your job, media.
You have no messages.
Nobody loves you.
This investigation of the president was corrupt. The FBI and the Department of Justice were politicized and weaponized. And in my opinion, there are only two possibilities: that you were deliberately corrupt or woefully incompetent. And I don't believe you were incompetent. This has done severe damage to the professionals and the honorable men and women at the FBI, because law enforcement should not be used as a political weapon. And that is the legacy you've left.
That was Texas Senator Ted Cruz grilling former FBI Director Jim Comey on Wednesday about his leadership overseeing the Crossfire hurricane probe. Comey, who oversaw the Bureau during the 2016 election up through the presidential transition period, told the Senate he did not know the source of the Steele dossier and that he did not recall anyone ever using the Logan Act against General Michael Flynn. Devin Nunes is the ranking member on the House Intel Committee. He is the author of the new book, Countdown to Socialism. Congressman Nunes, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks so much for joining us.
Always a pleasure. Good morning.
So first, evaluate the Jim Comey testimony that we saw in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee this past week.
Well, you know, on certain days, James Comey has an intelligence level higher than Einstein. He seems to know everything. He takes immaculate notes. He even takes those classified notes home and shares them with a lawyer. Somehow those notes end up in the New York Times. But then other times, like you would think when you've actually opened an investigation into the Trump campaign in Russia, he seems to have amnesia. He's forgotten everything. And look, and I'll just make this point. We asked him specifically, and all the other dirty cops at DOJ and FBI and the intelligence agencies in January of early 2017, where did this dirt come from? None of them seem to know the answer. And you know what, Maria? Every damn person in that room knew the answer except for the Republicans.
These people are sick.
That's the truth.
Unbelievable. Well, we want to talk more about this. I want to point out this op-ed that Kim Strassel from the Wall Street Journal wrote last week, and it's called The James Comey Election. And in it, she writes, Mr. Comey personifies what enrages Americans after they have gone through 3.5 years of this collusion narrative. She says this was the crew that in 2016, based on the thinnest of tips, launched a counterintelligence investigation into a presidential campaign complete with secret surveillance warrants and informants. She goes on to say this all took place in Barack Obama and Joe Biden's Washington. Those 8 years also featured plenty of other swamp monsters. Don't underestimate the number of Americans who fear a return to that world. Lois Lerner harassing conservative nonprofits. Supervisors at the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives losing guns in Fast and Furious. The EPA minions who burned companies with ever-changing rules.
We came, we saw, we died.
And the list goes on. This is why she's calling this the James Comey election. Will the American people understand what took place under Joe Biden and Barack Obama's watch and this plan to take down a candidate and then a sitting president, Congressman?
Well, look, Maria, this may sound a little self-serving, but the reason I wrote Countdown to Socialism is exactly for this reason, that people need to understand the consequences of this election. We are going to go back to what we've been living through, this nightmare. For me, it's been 4 years. You have to remember, I was first briefed on this in September, that the Russians were doing something nefarious, but was never given any information. And now what we find out from the briefings we've recently had, and I know you asked Leader McCarthy this is a real problem, that these documents that clearly our government had, the legislative branch of government never received these. Remember what I said earlier about that January meeting? Hey, who the hell paid for this? And remember, it was the work that we did, the House Republicans did. We had to fight through subpoenas. We had to prove that it was the Clinton campaign and the DNC that had paid for the dirty dossier and this dirty information. Remember all of that happened? We should have been, they knew about this 4 years ago when myself and Speaker at the time, Paul Ryan, were briefed, and they hid this from us, and they continued to hide it all the way until we uncovered it.
These people are sick.
But I will tell you, the documents that are underlying that we now have seen, I've only seen a few of those. They're definitely smoking guns. That information definitely needs to be made available to the American public. And from what I understand, there's even more underlying evidence that backs up what Director Ratcliffe put out. And just think how long it took for us to figure out this information. I know it's mind-boggling. This has been a very difficult task for us to get to the bottom of, because you have corrupt officials, and I think that's the point here. Are you going to go back and elect somebody like Biden, who just the other night, Maria, had the audacity to go after President Trump once again for what? That Putin, I think he said he had Putin wrapped around his finger. And then he didn't answer the question of why did his son get $3.5 million from a Russian oligarch with ties to Putin?
We choose truth over facts. And the only cure for that Trump derangement syndrome is 4 more years.
If Ivanka Trump had been bought a Big Mac in the Red Square by a Russian oligarch, they would have locked her up and they would have said, this is evidence of collusion.
These people are sick.
Here you have the media, which is the propaganda arm of the Democratic Party, ignoring all of this for the last 4 years. And now you have on a debate stage, why did your son get paid $3.5 million from a Russian oligarch? So here they've been blaming Republicans have something to do with Russia when the whole damn time they have something to do with Russia. I think what they think is that it's okay for them to take all this money and grift, but they'll just take and accuse Republicans of doing it to cover up their tracks. And that's basically what we knew about this the whole time. There was plenty of circumstantial evidence to know this, Maria, that the Clinton campaign had created all of this because they knew that 33,000 emails were out there somewhere. They knew that Jason Chaffetz and House Republicans were trying to find those emails. So what did they do? They created a sick fantasy.
These people are sick.
And the only cure for that Trump derangement syndrome is 4 more years.
Okay, this was the Clinton campaign. I want you to remember this. The Clinton campaign created this sick fantasy. Then they went out and hired avatars to do it. So they hired a former British spy named Steele who did the Steele dossiers. Then they hired this suspected Russian spy, okay, so that they could give it a veneer of being a Russian. So imagine that. Now you have the Democrats hiring Russian spies, getting $3.5 million from Moscow, and nobody in the media seems to give a damn about it. And so I think what Leader McCarthy said is exactly right. Every Republican, senator, and member of Congress should be saying, this is over. We want every damn bit of evidence that every intelligence agency has, or it's maybe time to shut those agencies down. Because at the end of the day, our liberties are more important than anything else we have in this country, and they have been stampeded over by these dirty cops and the Democratic Party and the media who fails to report on it.
These people are sick.
Yeah, this is absolutely shameful that this report last week that DNI Ratcliffe declassified got no coverage from the mainstream media. No coverage. What a disgrace that our liberties and rights have been trampled over because of one political campaign coming up with an idea to stir up a fantasy, stir up a scandal around the other political campaign. And the FBI went right along with it and weaponized our intelligence agencies to go against Donald Trump. So what else can you tell us about this? You were briefed by DNI Ratcliffe, part of the Gang of Eight, a small group of 8 congressmen who are privy to intelligence out of the executive branch. What can you tell us? Is there more coming? And by the way, you just said many times you've never seen this. When this story first came out last week, that is the first thing that the media said. This was out and it was debunked. What you're saying is you've never seen this.
Yeah. Well, look, remember, the media is essentially the Democratic National Committee. So they're putting out the same propaganda to cover up the tracks because the media was involved in this the whole time. Remember what I was saying, that we were looking for all this information because we suspected, and look, it was really, I got to credit Lee Smith, the investigative journalist who actually wrote about this in his book. He actually discovered just by going through and looking at what the media was saying, looking at what the campaign was saying, and the timing of it all, and then he actually got his hands on what were, these are really unknown, only Lee Smith has these, the proto-dossiers. So these were the early dossiers, and I would encourage everybody to go back and look at the early dossiers before you got to the Steele dossiers. So essentially what you had is you had these sick fantasies that were in these proto-dossiers that then they hired the Russian spy and the British spy to make it look like it was real to cover up what the Clinton campaign was doing. And so now there's a bunch of underlying evidence that I've only seen a little bit of this week. I think there's a lot more of it. I will also say this, if you ask with other information that I think we need to see. We need to see, we had this FBI agent, 302 came out about his recollection of everything that had happened. So the Russian spy that the Democrats hired that actually worked for a left-wing think tank called the Brookings Institute, we need to see, he was interviewed 3 times. And in fact, he was even given, supposedly he was given a get-out-of-jail-free card because he testified. Now, when he testified, he said, I don't have anything. At least that's what we're being told by Horowitz and others. The American public needs to see the 3 reports that we know about, at least, from the Democrats' Russian spy that they hired. So that's additional documents that we need to see. And then just on a, on another note, you see that that McCabe isn't going to testify this week because he's fearful for his safety. He's supposed to testify before the Senate. This is new evidence too. I'm not familiar with COVID transmitting over the internet, but it seems the dirty cops at the FBI, they can get COVID over the internet now. It's a shame that these guys now are not going to testify before the Senate.
These people are sick.
Welcome back. We just heard from Congressman Devin Nunes, and he said the plot to take down President Donald Trump was far more sinister than anybody ever expected. My sources tell me that DNI Ratcliffe declassified only a small portion of the intelligence which implicates Hillary Clinton. There is more. Even so, without Ratcliffe and his predecessor, Rick Grinnell, the American public would never have known about any of it. As acting director of national intelligence, Grinnell and now Ratcliffe view more raw intelligence than anyone in the country, except for the president. Rick Grinnell also served as the U.S. ambassador to Germany. He joins me right now. Good morning, Rick. Great to have you this morning. Thanks so much for joining us. And you really got the ball rolling, starting to declassify these important documents. Can you react to what you just heard from Devin Nunes?
Yeah, first of all, let me start, Maria, by really thanking you. You've been on this story. This is something that the American people need to know the truth on. Transparency is not political, and anyone who's trying to pretend that bringing the facts out and bringing the documents out is somehow nefarious or political is just dead wrong. We've had a scandal developing, and the scandal has developed largely because politicians have allowed individuals to hide information to create a false narrative on one side.
These people are sick.
What Devin was saying, I think, is very real. What we heard from James Comey this week was really shocking, because James Comey is blaming lower-level, mid-level career intelligence officials for this whole debacle. He's pleading that he didn't know anything about it and they did it. And so this is the first moment where he's throwing the intelligence community officials, career officials, under the bus.
So he's throwing them under the bus by saying he didn't know anything. Was this not the most important investigation the FBI has ever conducted into a sitting president? And he says he didn't know. If he didn't know, why was this investigation happening out of headquarters, right? Wouldn't an investigation be happening in the field office? Instead, it was right there under his watch. How is it possible that he didn't know?
Oh, I think it's not possible at all. He was a leader who knew every detail, took copious notes, and he's now just pretending that he didn't know. But the most important part is he's blaming mid-level career officials. Let me be clear to intelligence officials, career individuals that I've worked with who are incredible people, who have been shocked at what has happened, that leadership has hid those voices that were early on saying this is Russian propaganda, we shouldn't go with it. But the leadership, James Comey and others in the leadership, decided to hide those warnings from career officials, and now he's blaming career officials. Let me just say, these career intelligence officials who largely live in the D.C. area are represented mostly by Senator Warner, who sits on the Intelligence Committee, who is a leader on the Intelligence Committee. And Senator Warner has been completely silent on protecting those individuals who did the right thing early on by creating warnings saying this is Russian propaganda. Senator Warner is protecting James Comey. If you live in Virginia, this is an outrage that you are not being represented by a senator who has your interests. Because when I saw James Comey throw the intelligence community officials under the bus, that's outrageous, should not be allowed to happen.
So I want to ask that about Mark Warner. I also want to ask you about Gina Haspel. Gina Haspel does not want any more declassifications coming out. Why? Welcome back. I'm back with former acting DNI Rick Brunell. And Rick, we were just talking about this declassification, this bombshell declassified document, which happened last week. You saw that Gina Haspel has been reluctant to release information about what took place in 2016. That's the head of the CIA. Is that what you've experienced as well, and why?
Look, Maria, I don't think it's helpful to publicly criticize the heads of intelligence agencies, especially as the former acting director. I've worked very closely with all of them, but let me just say this, that I think it's incredibly important that we all lean forward on releasing documents. If the documents are not showing specific sources or methods in how we got those pieces of information and intelligence, I think that this scandal is big enough that we need to lean forward and declassify and release the information, especially when we have U.S. senators asking for this information. I think it's incredibly important if we want to have intelligence agencies that the American public has faith in, and it's clear that this past several years, our intelligence agencies and other agencies of the U.S. government were weaponized against their political enemies. And this is a scandal that people need to pay attention to. And this is also, let me just say this, this is what happens when the insiders maintain control over all of the information. And this is why I believe that President Trump, as the outsider, is being viciously attacked, because he's getting close to really changing the way that Washington works, and they do not want the rules changed, which is why they've gone back to the guy that they can trust as the nominee. The 47 years of Joe Biden, they know exactly what he's going to do and what rules he'll play by.
President Trump addresses the nation while he's being treated for COVID-19 at Walter Reed Medical Center. Let's bring in Mark Meadows, the White House Chief of Staff, who is live on the phone from Walter Reed. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Nice to be with you. And obviously, this is an important day as the president continues to improve and is ready to get back to a normal work schedule. He's already, this morning, we've already had a couple of discussions on items that he wants to get done. Candidly, has already tasked me with getting some declassification rolling in a follow-up to some of the requests that Devin Nunes and others have made.
What are the details for today? What time will he be leaving, and do you think he should be leaving?
Our intelligence community just came out and said in the last few days that the Kremlin, meaning Putin and the Russian government, are directing the attacks, the hacking on American accounts to influence our election. We have never in the history of our country been in a situation where an adversary, a foreign power, is working so hard to influence the outcome of the election. And believe me, they're not doing it to get me elected.
That was Hillary Clinton in 2016. They've never stopped talking like that. Russia! They're undermining our democracy as China takes over the world. Back then, it was part of Hillary's strategy to smear Donald Trump as a Russian agent, and of course, as you well know, it worked. Today we learned much more about how American intelligence officials knew about the plan at the time and participated in it to some extent. The Director of National Intelligence now, John Ratcliffe, has declassified handwritten notes from former CIA Director John Brennan, who was a leftist and a partisan. The notes discuss intelligence that Hillary Clinton had approved a proposal from, quote, one of her foreign policy advisors to vilify Donald Trump by stirring up a scandal claiming interference by the Russian security service. Just a few minutes ago on Twitter, the president tweeted that he has, quote, authorized the total declassification of any and all documents pertaining to the Russia hoax. Why did he do that 2 years ago? But he's doing it now. And what will we learn about what Joe Biden knew about all of this? Sean Davis is the co-founder of Federalist. We're happy to have him on tonight to untangle this web. Sean, thanks a lot for coming on. So what have we learned in this new tranche of documents?
Right, so we learned that the knowledge of what Hillary's campaign was doing went to the highest levels of the U.S. government. It wasn't just at the FBI. The CIA knew it. The CIA director knew it. The President of the United States was briefed on it in the Oval Office, and the Russians knew it. And that's important because as the FBI was pretending to look into whether Trump was colluding with the Russians, our own intelligence services knew that Russia was aware of Clinton's plans and therefore able and possibly likely to start injecting disinformation of their own into her entire process, which is what actually happened.
I mean, it seems like if our intel agencies knew this and then sat and passively, in some cases actively participated in this endless hoax for 3 years, then, I mean, they were undermining democracy, and they should be punished for that. And none of them have been. They haven't even been unmasked. I mean, what the hell?
You're exactly right. I mean, this wasn't just some sort of like silly game that had no real consequences or implications. These people use this to cast doubt on our elections. You know, they talk about the integrity of our democracy. They were the ones crapping all over it. And they, after Trump was inaugurated, they went and hijacked the presidency. They tried to cripple it. They put in this completely bogus special counsel based on false pretenses to cripple the administration heading right into the 2018 election. And the problem is that if nobody is made to pay for this, if nobody goes to prison, it's going to happen again.
Fool me once. Shame on you. If fool me, we can't get fooled again.
And when it happens again, because these people are going to be completely emboldened by the lack of accountability, it will be far worse, even if that may be hard to imagine.
Exactly.
Far worse than what they did in 2016, which itself was criminal.
It's not even about Trump. It's about the country. You want to live in a place where the CIA operates independently from the president against the favored party's political enemies? I mean, I can't imagine anything more third world. And what about the current CIA director? What did she know about all this? We should find out. I hope you'll come back, Sean Davis. I wish we had more time. There's too much news. But I appreciate your explaining all that.
Thank you.
How dare you?
How dare you?
Fire up a bowl and accept your fate.